Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of the Fret Success Guitar Show. I've got Kevin Stebner here from Calgary. And he's going to talk to us about his history and all of his achievements and things he's done in the world of music. And yeah, an interesting guy to talk to. So without further ado, we'll crack on and meet Kevin. How's it going, Kevin?
Good.
So good, thanks for coming down. I wanted you to come on the show to chat a bit about your history as a guitar player. But also I know you've done a few interesting things like setting up record labels, running record labels, production, art installations, been in bands over the years. So I kind of want to start at the foundations of maybe your guitar playing as to how you got into that and what's kind of made you interested in it in the first place, and maybe going from there, really.
Sure. Well, I mean, I started, like, my first bands I was playing as a drummer. So in my early bands, I just drummed and I felt kind of trapped behind them a little bit. Okay. So I bought a guitar and just kind of taught myself how to do it. So I think I have some pretty bad guitar habits, but they're kind of the things that have like become like my own style and my own trademark for it. So but it was because I wanted to write more songs, and just being stuck behind a drum set, like guitar kind of gave you the freedom to like actually be the main writer and start to like do more things, not being stuck behind like a wall of circles.
So when did that start for you? When did you start playing guitar? When did you move from the drums to even pick it up?
I was playing drums like even as like a 14-year-old. Mm-hmm. So, but my bands did a bunch of records kind of in the early 2000s. So we, after that, I lived in Korea for a year and sort of wasn't playing enough music. So kind of when I came back, this was probably around 2006, that I kind of was like, I want to start playing more drums. I want to make the record label more active. I want to just kind of like get more immersed in the music scene. And so kind of like being so secluded in a country where you didn't speak the language and didn't know anybody, coming back, I had all these like goals in mind that I wanted to do. So some were just like, I want to make a record and I want to put out some of my friends' bands and do some of those things. So yeah, just like kind of willing it to happen. It
was kind of organic. You kind of just felt naturally on the guitar. It just progressed, and you were not really putting too much.
I mean, not really, because like I didn't really know what I was doing. Okay. So, but that's kind of like that's what's cool about punk. It's like you can just like, if you learn a couple things and just like, oh, that sounds cool, and then you just like play it loud and fast enough, and that's going to be great. So, in a way, yeah, it wasn't organic because like I just kind of faked my way into it and just like muscled your way into making music. So
how long were you playing guitar for before you actually made the jump to play in like a live band environment?
Oh, like
straight away?
Immediately.
Okay. So you were gigging straight away, or was the?
Yeah, like I bought like a crappy guitar in Korea. I was playing like my dad's like acoustic, just like as a teenager, but never really started doing that much writing. So kind of like after that, like kind of writing while I was living in Korea. So a lot of those things became what Stalwart Sons became in a way. So kind of some of those early songs had culminations in Korea, I guess. But it was because it was just like, I was just like listening to a lot of Discord bands or whatever that you just like, I want to like follow this legacy.
So yeah, I've noticed that's the key kind of credential or influence in your style, like kind of. But that's cool.
Absolutely.
It's kind of on key, and it's very popular.
Not in this day and age with the young kids.
But not with the young kids. I'm talking like maybe in the guitar scene, because it was always polished for a long time in like pop rock music. Like the guitar was more formed, and then kind of was it like the early 2000s you developing this more kind of discorded feel.
Well, for me, it's like before that, because like all of those records that I really loved were kind of like mid 80s. Upwards. So it's kind of like. Yeah, like anything that like Fugazi related we're doing. That first record was 88, but even their bands before that, like Rites of Spring and all that.
Wow.
So all of that kind of stuff for me was like discovering those bands and kind of like being like, oh, like this is the thing I actually like about it. It's not necessarily the playing, although they're incredible players, but it's more like the emotion and the feel and like what's driving it as opposed to like the playing itself.
It's very like rhythmical as well, isn't it? It relies on rhythm.
Absolutely,
a lot, so.
yeah.
And being a drummer, I guess that gave you
I
an
think
advantage in a way?
that's a big part of what I do, because I'm always like focused on like rhythms and those drummers. So even just like being aware of like, hey, like I want to flip the time signature here, or I want to like, oh, we're just adding 2 more beats here. Like even thinking in patterns differently than just your basic 4/4 patterns over and over. So like having that ability prior probably helped quite a bit.
Give you a head start, I guess, especially for that style of music.
I think so, yeah.
It's giving you a leap ahead, really. I always find that rhythm's the hardest thing to teach, so I think you've got an amazing advantage coming from a drumming background and just going straight in.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
What made you form a label when you came through music writing, recording your own music? Was that quite early as well? What kind of inspired you to do that? Was it frustration or?
Well, not. I mean, sort of, but like in a way, it was just. I just saw a lot of cool things happening around me, but there's just in the sheer nature of like the Alberta music scene, there isn't like a. I don't mean this in like a terrible way, but there just like isn't that much support for the arts and cool bands in Alberta. Like, I don't think Alberta really sees that kind of thing as like a focus, like of importance. So for me, I was always just like, oh, like all these bands are so cool. Like I've got $400, I can help put out a tape, and then just kind of just built from there. So it was mostly just like seeing and recognizing the cool things around you.
And there was a need and you felt you were capable?
Yeah, well, and then even just kind of doing my own band stuff, it's just, it all stems from like a DIY ethic, and then, I mean, like that comes from like Discord scene as well, I guess, but it stems from just being like, no one's gonna do it for you.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I wanna put out my band's record. Is anyone else available to do it? Not really. So then like, okay, I'll learn how to do it.
So that started what?
Well, probably around 2006.
Right, okay.
Well, I mean, like, so I do a cassette label and a record label.
Yeah.
So the cassette label for one of my old bands, right before I left for Korea, was called Draft Dodgers, and I just did a cassette, and then I thought that would kind of just be like a one-off, but then coming back is after then I started like, oh, I've got this like tape label moniker, Bart Records, like why don't I just like keep it going? And then like, oh, my band, I want to do an LP, like okay, then I'll start a record label, like a LP label. So but it just, began as, because I felt the need that there's like, oh, I want these things to have like physical, like life in the world. And so just like, well, let's make it then.
How did it work in terms of getting bands on the roster, and were you kind of creating a community that was kind of holding the label up and helping it self-promote itself, or was it a bit more you were targeting artists and seeking artists? How was it?
Yeah, I mean, like being like small music scenes in Alberta. So like I was really like interested in like this. There's like when I came back from Korea, there's tons of really cool stuff, like really cool like hardcore stuff, emo stuff happening in Edmonton. So I just like kind of really wanted to immerse myself in that. So a lot of that stuff came from Edmonton, but then coming back to Calgary, there was just like all these great things popping up. So I think because being Albertan, it's like it is a pretty close-knit community. If you're playing in a band in Alberta, you pretty much know everybody. If you've been around for a little while, that you start to like see, you always see the same faces. Even those people that aren't in the same style of band as you, you're still going to each other's shows and you're still like being active because you're kind of all in it in the same way. You're all kind of trying to like foster a music scene and music community.
So was it similar genres that you were on the label? It was very much genre specific, or just anyone?
It was whatever I thought was like really cool.
Yeah.
So I mean, it kind of started off as kind of like a punk and hardcore thing, but then like I needed to put out my chiptune stuff, so that came a thing, and then I don't know. It's kind of all over the map, really. Like, but it's just kind of usually it's things that fostered from like my relationships with friends or cool bands that I saw, or just kind of things that like I thought more people needed to hear, and so like the 100 copies I could do would help it go further. Yeah, no, the uniting factor of it is just things that I think are cool. So
Yeah,
me, yeah, it's just whatever I think is, if it sounds rad, I want.
That's cool. That's a good way to go about it, and I think more of the kind of grassroots labels, if you would give it that term, I guess.
Yeah.
That's nice about them. I think it gives it a bit more character, and people can relate to it more, and that's quite cool.
Yeah, like I'm not searching for a sound. It's just if like
But some people
do
do.
I think something's excellent?
Yeah.
Then it's like, yeah, bring it up, bring it on.
That's the way to do it, exactly. So that's still active? You kind of do that?
Yeah, it definitely has been going less in the last few years, just based on finances. But
yeah, sure.
it's I did like the last little while. I've done this local band Lucid 44's new tape, so that just came out. So maybe a couple more in this year. So I used to do about, like 6 a year kind of thing.
Right.
But now it's like maybe three a year. So it's like it's still pretty active, but not what it was. So
Still
because
hard.
now I'm like kind of moving into other territories. So, but yeah, I'm not letting it die.
So what kind of things are you moving on to now? What's taking more of your time? Oh,
Well, I mean, I've got like 2 very active bands right now, hopefully recording records in the next little while. Just trying to break into video game composing, so I've been doing a little more of that.
yeah.
I just finished my 2nd book of poems, so I'm shopping that book. I started up a arts market called Starry Dynamo, and that's happening in a couple weeks here as well. So I don't know, just fingers in all the pies, just like trying to do it all. It's like if you have an idea, I just try to make it happen.
And do you do a lot of everything you've described by yourself? Is it very much self-driven, or do you tend to have a couple of people that help you out and you have a team around these events?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it is largely self-driven, but it's always like based in like the community. So there's always helping hands. There's always people or collaborators that you want to work with. So bands are always collaborations. Starry Dynamo, we've got like a team. So a lot of it's, of course, it's like collaborations, but yeah, like a lot of it's just because like I have a harebrained idea and want to bring it to life.
That's cool. And do you find it hard to see that through sometimes? Are you quite good at getting it to fruition and making it happen?
I think I am pretty good at it.
Yeah.
I think that's, I spoke about this at like kind of another like artist talk I did recently, but I sort of feel like the best method to be like proactive is just to have a lot of projects. I know it might take longer for those because your focus is always on something different.
Yeah.
Being able to like respond to different like inspirations, like is the good thing, is the best thing to do it. Because if you get stalled on something, instead of beating your head over like, oh, I can't like how do I finish this one? Just like move on to the next thing and let the other one simmer for a bit. So just being able to like follow your muse in a different direction.
Yeah, it's nice to have a creative pool of ideas that you can just pull things from at different times.
Yeah.
You kind of just pick things up quite easily and go, oh, this is the time to take this project now and run with that. Or
yeah, sort of. It's just kind of like, oh, I have an idea for a song. Oh, it'll definitely fit for like this band or this project. Or just being like, oh, I've got this idea for like a solo guitar thing. Maybe I'll just like play with this. So it's just, we're like, oh, I've got this, like, I came up with a really good line. It doesn't work in this song. Maybe I can use it in like a poem here. So yeah, just being able to like have different modes to put them in.
I think that's quite important. I found that hard to do over the years and probably guilty of taking on way too many projects, but I appreciate where you're coming from. I think it's made me better at doing all sorts of things.
Right.
Rather than just being, I don't know, I never wanted to just be an expert in one thing. It was nice to turn your hand to loads of different things.
Which is usually what I find like the opposite of people's like advice to artists. It's just like focus on that thing and become really good at it. Or even like writers, they always say like, oh, make sure to like work on it every day and have a regiment. And I kind of like, I don't know if that would work for me.
Creatively, I find that hard. I find that hard to really dig down and perfect a craft at one time and just kind of work on that one thing. I agree. The advice you always get is just get rid of all other distractions and focus on one thing at once. But I think it's better to be a jack of all trades almost.
Yeah, or even just like follow your interests. If you're interested, you can be interested in like 1,000 different things, but just like read every book and listen to every record, and like those are, by being able to like put those ideas together is probably what will make your art better, even because you have like this base of knowledge, because you've read everything, because you've seen everything and like heard a ton of music, and then you're able to be like, oh, this is a great idea, these are great ideas, I can put these together, and like your world is far expanded beyond like people's like blinder views.
So school, college things, has any of that kind of set you up for this?
Well, I mean, like I have a degree in English, so
Okay.
so that's kind of where my writing aspirations ended up. I also have a degree in education, so
Okay.
I do some music education here as well. But yeah, like no actual like music. I mean, but having like that like English background is an arts focus, so it is. Yeah, I think they all go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Like we keep arts like pretty regimented, but it's like every reading goes into writing music, goes into visual art, because like you have, despite not being like studied in like credentials of a certain art form, you still have like artistic credentials that allows you to like look at things like objectively and critically and like interestedly.
So playing in a lot of bands, and you've been in a part of a lot of festival performances, I'd like to get kind of an insight. I do this with a lot of people I have on, like tips and tricks and what kind of preparation you do for doing like big shows, and maybe things that have worked and haven't worked over the years.
Honestly, like so much of it is just like having a big show. Usually it's never the thing you think it's going to be. You think it's going to be this thing that's going to like, everyone's going to realize that you're the best and like you're, you know, garner a million fans or whatever. But it's, you like, shows are just shows. Like they're, even if you're putting all this like extra pressure on yourself to like perform to like this high level, it's just, well, I don't think like honestly, just like playing like your friend's basement to like 30 people or 25 people is as important of a show as like playing for like a field of 1,000 people. It's like so you often put up pressure on yourself, and then you like build up things to be, they're not, because like in the end you should be playing, like making art and playing music because like you love it and you enjoy it.
Yeah.
If you're like looking for like lauding of other people, then you're going to be disappointed.
So have you actively worked on like performance more than your musicianship? Has that ever been a factor?
I think if I actually worked on performance, that I would probably, I think that would be too much of a facade. Like I don't focus on like the performance. Like whatever happens on stage is just comes out.
So it comes very natural to you, probably.
Well, I don't know if you saw it. So
yeah,
well,
watching live performance, it looked like you were very at home, and maybe that's because your art is very personal to you and you work on it hard and that sort of thing, and it just comes out naturally because of the kind of things you write and how it just comes together. It's just, you're very instantly proud of stuff, and rightly so. You should just kind of be like, yeah.
Like I'm excited. Well, it's
you're
like,
excited.
You're excited about the thing, but it's also like a lot of the music I write like has like levels of like anger, frustration, or like sadness, or kind of like emotions, whereas like people generally like to have just like, you know, like happy love songs. But it's just like, so if you're like dealing with like those other things, then like they have to manifest themselves differently. So it's like, if you're being like, oh, this is an angry song, well, it's just like, it has to be conveyed.
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot. I think when you're writing, but when I've written stuff in the past and you're in like an emotional moment, sometimes it's hard to pull out and be naturally like emotional in the context that you wrote the song. Sometimes you're kind of just not in the mood. Which is something that I've kind of worked on a little bit, but I think if you just kind of put yourself back in that mindset, it kind of comes back and clicks in.
Right,
But in terms of the writing process, is it very sporadic and intermittent, your kind of inspiration towards writing? Like you get an emotion like writing a song, or is it very much like, let's try and channel something that I experienced the other day, and how does it come about?
Most of the songs I write tend to just start with playing music, like just playing with the guitar and just like fiddling with it and just kind of being like, oh, just having ideas with like rhythms. But then kind of like when you're playing that riff over and over, you kind of like be like, oh, like I've been thinking about this thing, and then like a lyric will go into it, will fit into it in some way. So like they kind of, in a way, go hand in hand, but lots of them start not even with the idea of what it'll be about, but it kind of starts with like the song itself, and then like fitting your, like seeing what fits inside those riffs themselves.
So you start on the guitar generally and kind of work from there. Yeah. So sometimes it's hard to get inspiration on the guitar because it's not like a lyric where you've got an emotional. It's very obvious the emotion from the lyric.
Yeah.
So is there a way you kind of sometimes knuckle down and get a new guitar riff, or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like even just like it kind of stems from like that same thing of just like reading everything and listening to everything. It's just like the idea of like musicians being like the T.S. Eliot quote, like bad poets imitate, good artists steal kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's like, just you can steal ideas, but I mean, like in a way, it's just like just being like, oh, I really like this like drum rhythm that this band did in this song. Like, okay, let's like write to that, or be like, oh, I like how like the chord changed as like this kind of step down. But it's like even if you're like taking like this idea, you're still building on it like way differently because you've got your own bend on it. So yeah, taking inspiration or like ideas from like other places isn't bad.
No, definitely, yeah.
And even like, by doing so, by learning and studying those other things, you'll become like a better writer and a better player because like, oh, there's these ideas that I didn't think about before, and okay, now how do I move those in different ways?
So you write a lot of stuff and kind of pick out the good stuff, or what's that?
Yeah, I mean, I probably like for every song I write, I'll probably throw out 2.
Okay.
But so just like but if you write hundreds of songs, like I think that's a big part of it. Is just churn it out. Like if you're kind of like getting too focused on just like perfecting something, I think the spontaneity of other things gets lost. So by just like, oh, I wrote 3 songs, this is the good one, and then just like not being too precious about those others, in a way, just being like, or at least this riff is really good. I can hang out of that, use it for another part. So I think just being able to churn things out and just try to write things.
How's that critical process for you when you're throwing songs out? Do you have anyone you kind of religiously bounce ideas off and sort of say, what do you think?
No, not at all.
No.
I'm so internal.
Okay.
Yeah, so if it's just like, if I think it sucks, it's just like, get it out of here.
And how long does it take you to decide that? Does some sit on the back burner longer, I guess?
Oh, within like the hour of
Right, okay.
like writing them.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So you're quite good at writing songs kind of completely and then going, what's this look like? Or do you...
I like to bring at least finished ideas to the bands.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
because I don't know if I'm the best player in terms of being like responsive to other players in a way. So whenever like I write something, I always like have an idea in mind that I want to like take to the band because I know they'll be able to help shape it or like put it into context or things like that. Or just being like, oh, I know like I've got this part and I know like John is going to be able to like write this like a part alongside it. And so like writing with people in mind is like a part of it too.
Yeah.
So like having players with you that you can rely on and are good players themselves and that are on board with what you're bringing is like, that's the huge thing too. I think like playing music on your own like solo is a hard thing.
Yeah.
It's like you really need to like have almost like people with like shared mindsets too.
How long did it take you to find those kind of people? Has it been years? Have you had foundations with people that you still play with now? Or?
Yeah, I mean Cold Water has been around for a long time. And so the lineup has changed a little bit, but kind of even what we have now is really solid. So a lot of it is finding those people. But just from playing a lot of music, you kind of like always you find people here and there. Oh, I like what they did in this old band. Like I want to work with them. And so it's not easy to find those people at all.
No.
But you gotta go for it. Yeah, there's been tons of bands that just like didn't work out. But then when you find the one that does.
So when you're looking on your other projects, like I'm interested to hear about your like game, like songwriting and compositional work. Like how long has that been a thing for you, and how did that come about?
Well, I started doing it in Korea, so like almost 15 years ago. Is that long? Wow. No, maybe not long. 12 years ago.
Okay.
Ish. Yeah, around there.
Yeah.
Between there. But it was because like I wasn't playing music with people, like, and then so I just like I needed an outlet of some kind. And when you're in like a shoebox apartment in the middle of Seoul or whatever, you like, how do I make music sometime? Then like I found out like, oh, like I've heard about this chiptune stuff, and I ordered some carts and learned how to make it. And so just like growing up as like a member of the Nintendo generation, like the songs that like I grew up on as a kid, as much as like hearing like your dad's records, it was also just like hearing Mario Brothers over and over. And it's like, because that's the music that like, at least for my generation, I feel is like very much ingrained in us, because we all grow up on like hearing these songs over and over. So that was another type of music that I just like was interested in and was like responding to and wanting to learn how to do it. So it started off on doing like chiptune stuff, like using video game hardware as the instrument, but also like I wanted to write for video games. So even though the things I've been doing are like very small scale, like that's like a big interest where I want to be like kind of getting together with local developers and just like making some small games. So even like last week I did like a game jam, which where you get together with developers, and I wrote like 6 songs over the weekend just to like put them to games and things like that. So, but that's like, I mean, that same idea, just like having a lot of interests and kind of like being able to like put them to different things. And so video game sound is another one, you know.
So that's more melodical, isn't it, in the kind of the way things are done? And
in a way, yeah. Like I definitely want to write with like a mood in mind and kind of being able to like fit it towards a game. So yeah, it stretches you because you're writing towards not even necessarily like your vision. You're like playing towards like, oh, this is the vibe of this game, so I need to like write something in that mindset.
So they require you to write music for specific parts of the game and scenes, and you would write like an album almost of songs for that specific game.
Yeah, but like that's the thing. Like, oh, okay, I don't really know. I don't have the connections here, but it's like that's something you're working towards. It'd be like, I want to get into this. Like, how do I do it? Well, let's just get started and try some things and see, like, try to get out there. So, same DIY mindset.
So it's kind of been fitting around your other stuff rather than be a focus tool probably more recently?
Well, in a way, like, I mean, I've toured with the chiptune stuff, so, but it kind of did begin in a way that it's just like when a band wasn't able to be active, I would kind of put more focus into the chiptune stuff, the gray screen stuff, and but then you kind of just by doing that constantly, you end up amassing like 4 albums worth of stuff, and then like doing more games. You could like, be like, oh, I've got 30 songs here. Like because you just kind of like slowly plug away, and then it grows on you. But yeah, it began as definitely as a side project to kind of mitigate the times when the bands weren't able to get together or figure something out.
So you found it kind of a learning process where you've started to do the games early on, and how easy was it to develop to people's briefs to start with, and has that got better, or have you been pretty good at that?
I don't know. I think I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. But it's just it's you like when as a musician you've got your own ideas and your own styles, and so it's trying to like a lot of that is trying to be like, oh, this is the thing I'm good at, so I'm gonna like try to do my best at what I'm good at to like fit into their parameter. So, but that, I mean, like that's kind of like a fun thing to be able to like video game sound in general is like that. It works under that very method of like constraint. You have to like you're only able to have like 4 sounds, and you're only able to have like this like range, and like you can only do so many different instruments because it's like what an 8-bit sound chip is able to do like is pretty limited. So it's kind of like learning how to stretch those things and like go against the confines of it.
That's good. Then do you think that now applies to your guitar playing? Do you kind of put more limitations on your sound to kind of think, I produce quite good stuff when I have that limitation? Do you ever think that might help with your composition? And
well, but those are often like self-produced. It's just like, okay, I don't want a song that's like over 3 minutes long, like ever, or this one, like I want this one to just like, how do I keep like this rhythm going? Or I don't know. Usually, like in the confines of like the writing, you'll find like you'll have an idea, and so you want to like keep it in that zone, if possible. If you're just like too wacky and too many tangents, it's nothing, you lose the focus, I think.
Do you find that the vision gets muddied sometimes through other people you're playing with? Does that ever come a factor? Like takes you
Well, of course. Yeah, of course.
And how much does that affect?
It does, but like that's the nature of playing with people. Is like oftentimes your vision like won't be met, but sometimes like what the other people can come up with is like far beyond what you were gonna do. So it's, of course, that's give and take, but it's just putting trust in your fellow musicians to like work. Yeah, you're working together. It's not just like that idea of like having like you as like the focus or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I know I often front bands and I'm like the driving force, but like I don't want to be necessarily like the focus.
And that doesn't seem like it's ever really been part of you to be that person.
Yeah, no.
To kind of want that limelight, which is, that's good. I mean, I prefer the whole more of a jam feel, collaborative feel in music. It just excites me a little bit more rather than overproduced, overthought, and clearly one person's vision with like a producer maybe. But I think having the band collaboration side of things is...
Yeah, well, especially the things that like bands can do is solo projects don't do that. Like they don't have that like level of force and like just like energy that a bunch of people together will have. Like I don't know. Yeah, you can't. It's hard. You can't recreate what 3 or 4 people can bring live.
Yeah.
You know.
And you've always enjoyed that. You've always kind of thought,
oh yeah,
this is good for you. No, I have as well. I've always toyed with the idea of doing solo projects, and I'm releasing some kind of music through the guitar stuff, but that's just kind of a side.
Yeah, and same thing. Like, so I am working on like a solo guitar thing, but it's kind of like it isn't being as focused on because it's just like, oh, like the bands are like we've got good things on the horizon, so just like new songs, like recording time. So that's definitely the most exciting thing for me, I feel.
So what things are planned for you're in a couple of bands, you said?
Yeah.
What kind of things are coming up over the next 6 months, a year?
Well, Fulfilment, we recorded some demos. We've got a couple shows coming up in the next month or so. Playing at Tubby Dog, playing at Palomino, coming up. Hopefully, no plans as of yet, but we're hoping to record sometime soon with that stuff. Cold Water, we've got an LP at the ready. So we're recording in April. So hopefully we'll get that all laid down at that time. So yeah, I've got a new LP ready to go for that. I mean, those are the kind of the 2 big things for sure.
And what's the lead up like for that? Are you kind of got the releases? You'll get the releases ready to go and then start to do kind of a marketing strategy, or is it more like touring kind of thing? That's
the crux of it, because by being an older player, like if you've been playing music for 20 years, it's just by just the sheer nature of it, you might not have the ability as an older dude to no longer have the freedom to tour. So it's kind of like you have to like limit what you're able to do. It's just like, okay, well, maybe we can't tour. Maybe we can only do Vancouver and back or whatever. So, yeah, and I mean, you mentioned marketing, and I wish that was something I was good at, because I'm not. So that's something I could definitely use a hand in.
It's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, some great insight, and I think you'll agree there's a lot of different things we can pull from the interview here with Kevin. It'd be great if you could like, subscribe, share the content, drop a comment below if you have any questions, and definitely check out some of Kevin's bands and his work. Thanks again, Kevin. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
That's all good. And we'll see you next time.